Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Elite Physique University. I am John Gorman, your host. We got Jason Theobald in the house. Jason, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing all right, man. It's been a minute.
It has. Kayla is sick. She's got the flu, and she was super excited to host this podcast today. So, a little shout out to Kayla. It's been a bit since I've had to host one of these. As you guys know, before we start, I couldn't find the damn record button. So, I think I got my glasses on. We got Laurin Conlin back in the house. Laurin, what's going on? How are you?
Hello, thank you guys again for having me on. I'm super excited for today and this topic. So,
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. And I know we've got a lot of people that like to keep up with us business wise to kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to start this off. Jason, I'll start with you. Anything cool or interesting happened to you in the last 2 weeks? I know you're slammed busy, man. So I know I'm personally excited to kind of hear what's going on.
Yeah, geez. So January was our biggest month ever at NuEthix by 120K. Like we just smashed it. And it's because we brought on a sales team. We're, getting tons of brick to brick type accounts now. So that's going really well. And then this coming week, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, I guess that'll be like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll be down in Tampa, Clearwater area. So it's the last shooting for country ball. That's audience can look it up, but it's a streaming show. And basically NuEthix has a few spots on it, but the way they do it is they work us in. It's not just like an advertisement of a product in between. Like I'm on the show, like talking about the products and stuff. So I've been in two things to film, and this will be my third and last one. And then the next day we're on Boom America, which is a show about four companies. We were lucky enough to be one of them. Kevin Harrington, if y'all remember him from the Shark Tank, it's his show basically. He put together an A team. They pick the companies they want to work with, and then they film it. And we give them a goal, and they have to hit it. So our goal that we set as a company was to be in 500 brick and mortar stores by the end of 2023. I'm going to double it and tell Kevin's team to get us in 1,000. So we'll see how that goes. But that'll be fun. So I'm going to be coming to Tampa a lot because that's where the headquarters are. I think they're going to come here too some, but I'll be coming there. So it's just busy, man. And then as far as Scooby Prep goes, I mean, I do have a wait list for functional. It doesn't mean don't contact me. I'm moving through it as quickly as I can, but I'm just kind of the point now where like I don't want to take people on if I can't 100% give it the right attention it needs. I'd rather do a wait list or put them with one of my really competent coaches. So that's a good thing to have. I'm teaching my anatomy of a well-planned contest prep course coming up the 23rd. If anyone's interested, that's a Sunday. Or no, I'm sorry, it's the 26th. My bad. That's a Sunday. So that's next Sunday. I think I've got about 14 people in it. So it's been pretty popular. And so I'm good to see that. And then as far as my mentorship groups, those are full and I'm not opening them again until May. I ran like 6 of them this last time and it was just too much. I'm doing 2. That's it. So that's got a wait list. So all in all, everything's going really well. The HRT clinic is still growing leaps and bounds. I think we were up again another 25K last month. So it's just really killing it. So business wise, everything's pretty good. Quickly, Aiden committed to play Division II at Thomas More, which is a school like 20 minutes from my house, which is awesome. So I'll get to see him play. And then Maddox got his black belt by age 9 this past weekend. So he got past. He's never failed but one time, and he couldn't get this specific kick. And I don't blame him. It's pretty hard as a front kick. You got to get your toes back. It's hard for a 9-year-old. But he got it, man. He went and practiced his ass off and got it this next time. So a lot of cool things going on with the kids, a lot of cool things going on with the businesses, just staying busy and hoping it's, going to be a good 2023. So
Life is good, man. I'm glad to hear things are going so well. Laurin, what about you? What's new and anything exciting you got going on?
yeah, well, not as exciting as all that, but first of all, gotta let me know when you come down here and maybe we
okay,
can go grab food or something or train.
will do next
But
week.
yeah, Tampa is the spot, not gonna lie.
Definitely.
So it has grown so much. I mean, from the time that I moved here to now, I mean, it's just so crazy how different it is. But anyway, so actually, y'all will be the first to hear about this. I've only told a few people, but going through a rebrand for the company, 10 years, into business, want to get a new name, get a new feel for kind of just the direction that we're going. So that will be hopefully done by the end of March. So kind of Q2, roll that out. So really excited for that. And then got asked to do a speaking opportunity internationally, which again, I'll announce at a later date, but super excited for that. So I had to go through the whole passport BS because mine expired and I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And then now I was like, oh shoot, now I got to pay for the expedited fee because I actually do need to go somewhere. But so excited for that. And business is good. Brought on another coach. She's amazing. She actually just finished chiropractic school and she's a top CrossFit athlete. So she has a phenomenal background in terms of her education and her experience. So good things. I'm taking on clients right now. So I'm in the process of kind of revamping my own client list as well. So just, good stuff. And, it's as always, there's always a million ideas. And it's like, I'm like a big idea person and I'll just have all this stuff. And then it's okay. How do I organize this? How do I actually go down the list and do these things? So I always struggle a little bit there, but working on that.
Did you hire any help for a rebrand or are you doing it all on your own?
So for the rebrand, I did hire someone to do the graphic, for the actual logo and then come up with what she calls a rebranding kit. So essentially the fonts and the colors and the schemes and that kind of stuff so that I can cohesively add that to, any post, any documents that we have, so I'm really excited for that because again, it's something that I'm I tangibly know what I want, but I'm not good at putting that down, to create a logo or to,
For sure.
to finish those kinds of things. So
Do you have a new name yet? Or is it you keeping the
yes,
Are you willing to share or is that later?
Not yet, but we will.
Okay.
So I'm pumped for it. It's not that crazy, but I'm just excited for it. I feel like it'll be a better representation of everything that we do. So
yeah, that's cool. That's exciting. We don't get to talk a lot anymore because we're all just so busy. It's good to see you continue to keep growing. You've got this team that's just awesome. It's nice to see those things happening. I know real quick, I won't keep us long. With me, my fat ass got into shape because I had to go speak at our customer appreciation event. So I've been doing this pretty cool approach, and Kayla and I just did a podcast on it, which will drop. It'll have dropped before this one, but it's basically pairing up very, very rapid fat loss with diet breaks every about 3 weeks. And I know there's research out there that's been done on diet breaks and research on rapid fat loss, and I've really taken it in the trenches, and I've got about 15 of us doing it. And man, it beats the hell out of just regular dieting. We were trying to lose a pound and a half a week and diet for months. I'm going hard. So I've really enjoyed that. And I've got clients. I'm going to share the data, what I'm seeing in the trenches, because we know what the research says. I want to see what the application side of it looks like. So I'm excited. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, that's super rad. Me and Campbell did something like that too.
Did you?
And I did a little, I said, okay, what's going to happen if we do this rapid fat loss protocol for 2 weeks? Somebody who's you need an experienced person. It's not like your first time client,
right,
doing this, but we actually did see some measurable changes even in 2 weeks. Now it was N of 1, but again, I know my body pretty well and we were able to do that. So the idea is that's the idea of, okay, can we push really hard? If you have the person with the right mindset, can you do that? So it's definitely a different approach, and I'm sure you guys can relate. Honestly, the longer that I do this, the more I realize that almost any approach will work. It's so just client dependent, so it's I don't even really like to say oh, we like to do this one approach. It's more of what is the client actually going to need, or how are they going to respond to this?
Yeah. Laurin, I'll probably
do you push for 3 weeks or how long do you do it?
So I'm in phase 3 now. So the initial because I had enough body fat to do this, first of all, because you can't be stage lean into it. That's where you're fucked. You got to be I had some body fat, right? So I went from 224 to about 210 in 3 weeks. Most of that was in the first week. I dropped 5 and then I dropped 4 the next. And my calories were low. I dropped down to 1,700 calories. And I just pushed, no high carb days. And then I did about a 10-day diet break into my speaking event. And I maintained that because I was super strict. That was a key. And I only bumped up to like 2,200 calories because I just don't need a lot, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Then I pushed and hit another phase. Now I'm on my next diet break phase. And I've just taken a while. What I'm trying to do is I've lost a little bit of muscle because I just haven't been training hard enough the last 5 years, honestly. Putting a little bit of muscle on in those diet break phases, but I still got enough body fat to where I can get down to 205. And instead of me just doing this long diet phase for like 12 fucking weeks, like this is just much, much better because I'm not too lean. So I don't feel like shit and I've enjoyed it. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about it. And what I was about to say is, Laurin, I'll probably reach out to even you and Bill Campbell, and maybe we can all get together and do a show on combining the two. Because it's a different approach. It really
What's
is.
your weight loss goal? Do you have one or?
Yeah, I'd like to get down to about 205. I can see actually for me, which is really good at 210, I can see the outsides of my obliques, start to see the top of abs in the morning. And I've put the muscle back on. I just look way better than I did, just way better as far as like muscle wise, because I up my protein and everything. But anyway, that'll be a whole podcast in and of itself. From the business side of things, Phat Muscle's growing like crazy. We're up to like 25 coaches now. We just added like 6 new wholesale accounts, brick and mortar locations. Plus our sales are up. I mean, it's crazy here. But we're lucky. We're blessed. We're doing this the right way and adding people like us, coaches with a good client base. I don't give a shit about anything else. And they're really the key to this whole thing growing. So we're just going like crazy. We've got new products, birthday cake proteins coming, just all this new stuff. So it's fun, man. We've added apparel to it and we're doing our own apparel in-house. So that's been fun. We're just, being entrepreneurs. Like that's the thing. Like, sky's the limit and you can go create this thing the way you want. I'm just super blessed and fortunate. So I do have a cool speaking event coming up in St. Louis. It's called the Grit Summit and it's a business conference. So I get to actually talk about growing and building a business with customer loyalty and, customer satisfaction. And that's going to actually be fun. So kind of trying to evolve outside the fitness industry a little bit. So, we can all talk about bodybuilding, but to talk about business is fun. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me in a nutshell. And I know we've got a strict cutoff, Jay, because you've got some stuff coming up.
No, actually, I don't teach that class anymore, dude.
Okay, so
that good. Was one of my group mentors. I dropped it and I'm not refilling it. I'll always be good. I can stay on as long as we need. So
Laurin, do you have a hard cutoff at 5 Eastern your time?
No, I can go a little bit longer.
Okay. Well, and because there's going to be some questions here, I want to really be able to dive into this. So this is a heck of a topic here. And it's one that we've all talked about a zillion times. But the whole key with all this stuff is there's always new people that come on, or there's people that start to develop areas where they're going to struggle, whether it's 3 years in, 4 years in. And this is a topic, Laurin, I would say you're probably recognized as one of the experts in this area, because not only have you been through it yourself, we've all kind of been through it, but you've been through it, you've been very public about it, but you've helped a massive amount of people really understand body dysmorphia and finding balance and really kind of figuring out your physique. So if you would just start this off by giving us a little bit of background on why this topic has been something that you've really honed in on and wanted to help a lot of people with.
Yeah. So first, I grew up with an eating disorder. If anybody's heard my story, you know that. So grew up with an eating disorder, got into competitive bodybuilding, did that for many years, and doesn't matter how great you do it, doesn't matter who your coach is, how great your mindset is, like it just takes its toll, right? And I had seen through all those years, basically at the end of 2018, like my last season, I was kind of like, man, I've pretty much dieted for 20 years of my life. Like, I maybe need to take a bit of a break here. And it's really hard when you've gone through those phases, especially as a competitive physique athlete of, okay, I'm stage lean, or even the opposite of that. Like, oh, I have to push for off season because I have to maximize every little bit, right? And it's just a totally different thing. And when we don't feel like we're hitting either of those targets, clients really start to spiral. And I found myself, really struggling when I said, okay, I'm just going to take a little bit of time off. I don't know when, but I'm going to do what feels right for me and my body and just see what happens. And it was a little rough, it was rough for a few years there because it was kind of that period of just like recalibrating, because I really didn't truly know where my settling point was because I was always pushing it up or down. So you start to have a really skewed perception of yourself. I had completely irregular hunger signals, no satiety signals, and just overall didn't really feel that great. And I started realizing that as I was sharing this, that a lot of clients were going through the same thing. And I would say that at this point, our main clientele base is, hey, if you've been someone who is chronically dieted for most of your life, and you're a female, ages 25 to 55, and you may or may not have competed, or you've just tried every single diet, like this is generally who we're working with, because finding a solution and creating this new identity, mentally, and then also having the new habits and behaviors in place physically is really what we do best. So I would say that it really stemmed from my own experiences, and then really what I started to recognize with the people that I was working with, because I still work with competitors, but I started to realize that I was also working with the post-competitor client, right? Like, hey, I've competed. I don't really know if I want to anymore, but like, what does life look like afterwards? And that's really where this all started. I was like, okay, there's just too much here that like really need to work with these clients, because oftentimes, getting people ready for shows is one type of coach. But what is happening afterwards is very often neglected.
I like that you said that, because that's what makes a great coach. First of all, sometimes people start off and they're one type of coach, and we kind of all started off that way, right? But then you evolve and you start to figure out how to help different groups of people, or one person through a bunch of different phases of dieting. For our coaches listening, especially if you're a guy, like, you don't tune out. Like, don't think that like this happens to guys too. Like, I see it more prevalent in women. And the question I want to ask you to kind of kick this off, Laurin, is, do you think this day and age, prior to the world of social media, sure, you had magazines and TV and stuff like that to put a lot of pressure on women or people in general.
Mm-hmm.
If being a guy, I don't see as much of this as a female would, but do you feel like there's just extra pressure now because you've got social media at scale and everyone trying to show this perfect image, and it makes, like, do you feel like that's a factor?
Absolutely. I think it's not even just a factor of the physique, right? It's more of when you see someone who looks a certain way or is portraying a certain lifestyle, we only see that part, right? And I'm not even talking about just a highlight reel, right? Like obviously, first of all, I'm not faulting anybody for posting the best pictures of themselves, right? Like, nobody's like, man, I look like shit, let me post this up.
Yeah.
Obviously you may be doing that to like prove a point, right? And that obviously has its place as well. But if you took 5 pictures, you're going to pick the best fucking one to share. And I'm going to do the same thing, right? And we can all be vulnerable and share on social media, but it doesn't matter. We all feel this like disconnect of like, well, they wouldn't get it. Like, nobody else is going through what I'm going through. Whereas in real world conversations, with friends or peers or colleagues, and you have these conversations, you realize, all right, maybe I'm not as fucked up as I thought. Maybe everybody else is kind of going through something, but social media has created this lens of everybody else has it figured out and I don't, so I'm a failure. And when we start to think in that type of way, and we create that identity about ourselves, we then are saying, okay, well, I can't be successful, which then paradoxically, for a lot of people who've had either disordered patterns or previous eating disorders, typically that creates compensation patterns, whether it's overeating or undereating or overexercising or, completely derailing themselves. And people get addicted to that chaos. And then they're like, see, I can't do it. And then you create the self-fulfilling prophecy. So there's a lot of things there. But I would say that the biggest thing with social media is it creates this facade almost that everybody else has it put together and that you don't. Again, maybe that's just the lens that I see it, but I've talked to other people, and that seems to kind of be a trend. And that's even when people share like their vulnerable stuff, which again, that sometimes people overshare to be vulnerable, and that's a whole different social media predicament, but that's a different topic. So I would say that, yeah, it's definitely the scale of it and the access of it has changed things completely. Because like, yeah, when I first started, we were talking about this at the PC event, Jason, and like back in the day, when I first started 12 years ago, I'm looking at like the Diamatize blog or like the Gaspari blog, like what are the girls doing, or pick up a magazine, and you maybe see that, but you don't really, and you saw a picture from the competition, but you don't get to see everything like inundated 24/7. Whereas now, not even just physique stuff on social media, but travel stuff, fashion stuff. Oh, I don't have a good fashion sense like that. I couldn't put together outfits like that. How are they traveling like that? How are they doing that? Oh my gosh, their relationship looks so great. And all these things add up. And so it's not just the physique stuff, but if someone is using that as kind of a control mechanism, then it can be displayed in those behaviors.
Yeah, we need to come back on to a whole episode on social media, but we'll skip that for now.
Yeah.
Let's
Like,
let's jump in the trenches. And of course we can all chime in here. Laurin, I'm going to really kind of aim a lot of this at you. So going off Kayla's outline, she's got some really good points here. She says, before a client or an athlete comes out of a fat loss phase or contest prep, what do you do to prepare them for after? Whether it's someone that's new, because we know there's a big difference between someone that's their first time. We know they're going to come out of it way different than versus if we do it, right? We've been through this a lot of times. How do you start to prepare them when you're coaching?
So I would say a lot of this is going to stem from even before we've started, right? And a lot of times the conversation is very much centered on like, what are we going to be doing for this goal, especially when we're talking about fat loss. But if we haven't laid down that foundation beforehand, that is really where we start to run into some issues. So typically a lot of clients will come and say, hey, I have this fat loss goal and I fully support it. Especially again, if we're not even talking about a physique competitor, we're talking about a lifestyle client, like you want to lose body fat and you probably need to, okay, we need to expedite this process. But even then I would say we still need to have a period of like laying this foundation. If we're talking about a physique competition, absolutely, we are not jumping into a contest prep. So I would say for any coach listening or any potential client listening, if you want to do a physique show and you want to invest the time and energy and all of the adaptations that are going to come with that, you sure as shit better be able to prepare for a few months before a diet. Don't just say, oh, hey, there's a show in 12 weeks. I want to do it. That works once, maybe twice.
Right.
But as we all know, those methods do not work long term because now they weren't in the position in the beginning to even start the diet in the first place. Secondly, now you had to get so crazy aggressive during the process. And yeah, you can single-handedly focus on a goal for 12 to 16 weeks. I could hang off the side of the roof for 12, I mean, you can do anything, right? Like for 12 weeks, but then what are we going to do afterwards? So I think that the conversation needs to start with, where are we before? Have we laid the right foundation? The right habits, the right behaviors, metabolically, you're in the right place, hormonally, psychologically. And then from a like nitty gritty perspective, after a competition prep, I am bringing calories up very quickly, pretty much right away. And this is something that I developed out of my own practice because every time that I would be put on a reverse diet after a show, I would completely blow through that and it didn't fucking work. And I was like, I don't care. Shove your 10 carbs up your ass. Like, I'm like, that's like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like going from 100 carbs to 110 isn't really helping me here. Right. So now what I do much quicker is add in calories and bring down cardio, because the number one thing that I see with a rebound is not necessarily bringing up calories on a controlled way, but it's the overeating. And when we start to have overeating episodes, it's not just that one bolus of calories, which can certainly be detrimental. But again, it's the mindset starts to slip. Oh, I can't do this. I'm a failure. I might as well have another meal. Well, one turned into 5. And then you really start to rapidly add body fat back. So I would say first, what are we doing beforehand? Are we taking the adequate measures before we enter into a diet? And then secondly, after a diet, again, for someone who's in a competition, this is not a lifestyle diet, but someone who's gotten very, very lean, we're going to be bringing up calories fairly quickly the first few weeks to stabilize and minimize as many overeating episodes as possible.
What about any red flags that you typically see when you're working with someone that tells you they might start to become too food obsessed? And I know I can tell some stories. Well, back in the day when Jason actually was my coach, when I would eat cans of pumpkin at a time because it was so filling, right? Or I would eat all the sugar-free Jell-O just to because when you're new, that feeling of being just ravenously hungry, for some people haven't experienced, you're like, oh, fuck, like this doesn't go away. You just want to feel full, which is not the mindset to have. What are some things that you notice that people are starting to become too food obsessed?
Yeah, I would say the weird behaviors, and let's all be honest again, as people who have competed for many years and also coached competitors for many years, I don't ever see someone just kind of get away like scathe-free. Like I feel like something always kind of weird starts to happen. It doesn't matter how great of a coach you are, how great of an athlete you are, we kind of start to do some weird things in prep, those kind of obsessive tendencies tend to come out, especially because people who are predisposed to compete generally tend to be a little bit more on the neurotic side and also kind of wired in that more kind of type A obsessive personality anyways. They're drawn to the sport. So it kind of resurfaces a little bit. And sometimes it's like, okay, a byproduct of being this diligent with 1,200 calories and 90 minutes of cardio a day is, you're going to have to be a little bit obsessive, right? So I would say though, that when things start to get really, really hazardous in terms of like they're reporting very strange behaviors, in terms of maybe what they're eating or consuming or like rituals, around things. And that's generally when it's like, all right, we have to, it's really going to be client dependent. Has this person had severe issues beforehand? Is this playing a role? Like, are these things going to resurface really ugly? Not just like, oh, I overate twice, but like, now they're binging and purging for months on end. Like, we don't really want something like that to resurface. Other thing too is that then it's like maybe we need to adjust to the timeline of the show, and that's something that not every client is going to be able to do based on where they live. Some people don't have the luxury of having a lot of shows around them, but if somebody does, like, hey, maybe we need to push back the timeline because if you're maybe we can have a diet break here or a few higher days of food, maybe not even a full week, but at least a few days, or we can at least pull cardio down for a few days so you can, recover a little bit more. So it's really going to be case by case dependent at, obviously like any of this stuff is. But I would say that, yeah, the weird behaviors are kind of the initial thing that makes me pull back. And then I really will dig a little bit more and see like, what is the severity of this? Okay, are you eating pumpkin? Like, okay, a little weird, but probably not hurting anybody, right? Maybe your GI system, but or like, hey, are you not able to like leave the house until you do these 3 things and you've eaten this exactly and you cried because this happened? Like, it's like, okay, we're starting to see these patterns. Like, maybe we need to take a step back. And it's tough. It's really tough because everybody is going to respond very differently to being that lean. And you really don't know how you're going to respond till you get there. And I know you guys can attest to this. Like, it gets easier the more that you do it, just because you start to accept it. It's like I tell everybody like, oh, what's that hunger hack? And I'm like, accept that you're going to be hungry for the next 5 months. Like, I don't like, there's literally no other hack. The more that you try to hack it, I feel like the worse it gets, because then you're putting so much mental energy into how to not be hungry instead of just sitting with the hunger. But that does take a few, I would say, preps to really work through. Another obvious red flag if somebody starts to overeat during prep, right? And again, this isn't like, oh, I had 2 extra rice cakes. Like, this is like, shit really went off the rails for a few days. Then it's like, all right, we need to take a step back. Like, maybe we need to pause this, and revisit the timeline that we're on. But again, every client is going to be different. There's times where I've pushed people after that, and there's times where I haven't. So
we've all been around this for quite a while, and I just feel like this day and age is a little bit different. Jason, 2007, 2008, 2009, 10, we would see a lot of, and Laurin, you probably came up in seeing the same thing. We saw a lot of meal plans, right? Your 6 basic foods at work, like very, very set meal plans. And then flexible dieting starts to come along and everybody starts to understand it and count macros. And now it's at scale. It's like people have kind of fucked it up, honestly. But back in the day, I would see a lot of people have issues because they would come into not just their first prep or their first time dieting, but they get a bro diet, which there's nothing wrong with that. It was just very limiting. And then all of a sudden you would see all these issues. Do you still see that at scale, or are you seeing more issues come out of people being too flexible with their food? And I know this is a super interesting concept, but it's different now than it was 5 years ago, and it's certainly different than 10 to 15 years ago.
It's super different because, as always, the pendulum continues to swing. It's like, okay, hey, there were obvious issues with overly restrictive meal plans, but that doesn't mean that now, we have to do Pop-Tarts and egg whites, right? And that's kind of the big swing that we had. And what I've found also within that subset of people is that, and I've talked about this ad nauseum, but I think it's worth repeating, and because I want people to understand this, the rigidity has to do with your mindset. It doesn't have to do with what type of plan that you're on. You can be tracking macros and be just as rigid with your mindset as you are with the meal plan that you were given. And the whole purpose behind tracking macros was to have a deeper understanding of food and be able to make these modifications and to be able to moderate yourself, but if you can't do that because you're so worried that you're not going to zero everything out on MyFitnessPal, well, then we have the same issue that the meal plan was presenting. So I would say that some people can certainly mess up, IFYM by either being overly rigid, or to your point, John, they can be too flexible. And then it's like, well, why am I not seeing the results? It's like, well, there is a give and take here. Like, this is a contest prep. Like, we don't just get to eat weird stuff all the time and expect to have those results. But it really comes down to those like day to day, like the consistency there. Every once in a while, sure. But when we're talking about people who, all of our clients who we know who've been the most successful and even our most successful preps, like, what are you doing? Like, you're eating the basics. And I do think that having a self-created meal plan of sorts is really valuable for a lot of clients. And this is, honestly, kind of how I live now anyway. I wouldn't really call it like a meal plan, but I'm buying food and I'm prepping it and I'm eating it basically for most of my meals during the week, right? It's just reducing that mental fatigue of trying to plan things. And I think that a lot of people try to make things really, really fancy, especially during a prep. And I've never done that because I'm just too brain dead and like lazy to care. But I know a lot of people do. They're like, oh, I'm going to make this fun meal and do all this stuff. And it's like, that can be great every once in a while. But if we're doing that on a daily basis, like the amount of mental energy that's going into that is going to be pretty exhausting. I don't know if that answered the question because I kind of hit a lot of different buttons, but
No, it definitely does. And we're kind of blurring the lines here between two different topics, but that's okay. I want to get both of your take on something real quick. Something I've noticed, and I'm not the type of guy to go out and post on social and bitch about my clients. Other coaches do that, and it's a terrible fucking idea. All you're going to do is tell people not to fucking work with you. So stop doing that, first of all. But I'm going to bitch on the podcast, right? Because then you guys are going to weigh in, and I'm going to, this is free therapy for me. I feel like, and part of this I caused, right, with the book I wrote, The Flexible Fat Loss Solution. I am starting to see a trend, and you guys tell me if you're seeing this as coaches. I'm starting to see a trend the last few years of I'm getting more clients that can't stick to their fucking plan. And I don't know if it's too much flexible dieting and too much trying to shift things around, hit macros at the end of the day. But I've gotten more clients that I'm having trouble. I have to constantly talk to them about get back on your plan, get back on your plan. Are you guys seeing that more the last couple of years, or are you not seeing that? Jay, you can start with you, man. Are you seeing more of that?
No, I'm not. I don't really think so. There's every once in a while there's someone who can't, they're just not cut out for this, right? But no, I think for me it's been fairly. The people that are getting ready for shows, they've all been hard workers and get their shit done. And then I have so many people that have so much shit going on with them that they just want to be better and feel better. So they're willing to do whatever it takes. That's the kind of people I generally get. So no, not really. But I'm not dealing with like many new people, like people that are new to like dieting and stuff. Most of my people are either contest prep or they've been through the ringer with 10,000 coaches and
That
they
makes sense.
see what I'm posting and the results I'm getting with people with extreme, weight loss resistance and all that. So they're just there to get it fucking done. You know what I mean? So there's those one outliers, but no, I'm not really seeing that.
What about you, Laurin? Are you seeing any of that lately?
So I would say that as a general notion, like what I think we're seeing is there's more people who are competing, right? Like bodybuilding is still very weird and very niche, as we know, but it's certainly less weird and less niche than it used to be, especially when it comes to the bikini division, right? And I don't really work with any men's physique competitors, but I would imagine that it's a similar ish type of idea. But especially with bikini, because people see that and they go, oh my God, that looks so great. I can look like that. Like that looks healthy. And that looks like I can just train for a few months and get on stage. And unfortunately, there's a lot of also new coaches or coaches who just are predatory. I don't know, who sell that to clients. Yeah, of course. Like we can get on stage for this show in 12 weeks. And I can't tell you how many people still come to me with that mindset. And it's like, I'm not the coach for you. If you're interested in that, so sorry for I'm sorry you even wasted your time filling out the questionnaire, because that is not the type of service that we're going to provide. So I think that just as a general notion in this industry, there's more people who are seeing this as kind of something that's attainable, which it can be. But before, where it used to be like, oh my God, like bodybuilding, like that's so crazy and that's so extreme. And it was kind of this weird group of people. Whereas now it's become so much more popular, again, especially the bikini division, that people are thinking like, yeah, of course, like I can totally do that. And like I said, most people can get through a prep 2, maybe 3 like that, but you're going to be in trouble if you keep dieting like that without the right muscle mass previously. Most competitors don't have enough muscle mass. Like I'll just go on record and say that, you know what I mean? Especially most new competitors, you don't have enough muscle mass. And a lot of people, again, in the bikini division can very easily attain a bikini physique naturally, which is great. And I support, and I coach mostly natural athletes and don't suggest people need to do that whatsoever. But you then have to take even more precautions with how you're dieting. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to be losing lean tissue, the only lean tissue that you have naturally, like you're really going to run into some adaptations. So I think that it's more of just kind of like a notion in general of the industry that like bodybuilding is less weird and more, so just more people are doing it. And by default of more people doing something, you're just going to get a wider range of individuals, I feel like, who are going to fit that. And just in general, with more divisions, like before it kind of used to be like, hey, do you have a bodybuilding physique or not? Okay, if you don't, then you probably shouldn't do this. Now there's a lot more divisions that people can kind of fit into. So I think that has certainly changed the landscape.
Yeah. And maybe it brings down the level of extremeness that we see in bodybuilding. And there's just more people that want to do it. So you're getting less people that can actually do what it takes because it's extreme. But I don't want to spend, I just wanted to, while I had you both on here, ask that question.
Yeah, no, and it's frustrating because, obviously as coaches who have done this and have coached many people, like we know the rigors of this. And like, I would never watch like the Olympics and be like, I'm gonna do that in a few months, right? Like, okay, this person is like genetically selected to be great at this sport. Like their body has these proportions. They've been training since they were 2.5 years old, whatever, right? Like you wouldn't just think that they would be able to do that. Whereas with bodybuilding, it's like, again, when there was less divisions and less people, it was kind of like, here's the shape and the type of person that's going to be successful. Now it's like, bring everybody in. And it's like, well, not everybody has the same metabolism or the same genetics or the same muscle insertions, so it's just, I think that's where it's gotten a little bit.
I mean, I'd go so far as to say there's people that really shouldn't be put on a stage. Yes, you can get there, but the ramifications of it later are just a nightmare. But because of all the divisions, which I'm not against by any means, it's made plenty of coaches can now do this job too. So there's a catch-22. But I think there's certain physiques that shouldn't be put on stage, to be honest with you.
And that kind of runs into having a good off season. And this next point in question kind of dives into there. When you all have someone in the trenches that, we see this more with females, right? Like sometimes they have to really push to put that muscle on and they can get pretty heavy. What's the conversation look like? What do you all do when you have someone that's saying, hey, like I'm getting fat in the off season? And, body dysmorphia is a really, really real thing. But then you also have that area where you have to push and I'm not saying you have to get sloppy, but you almost have to get a little uncomfortable. What's that conversation look like? Because most people, they're like, boom, fuck this. Can I get 5 pounds off me real quick? I got a vacation coming up. Like, what's that conversation look like when someone says, I'm getting too heavy?
You go, Jason.
Sorry, you go ahead, Lauren.
Okay.
I was distracted.
So for me, that conversation is just being really honest, right? Because I also am that person. I'm somebody who's very adaptive after all these years of dieting, right? For me to get lean, I got to get really lean and push really hard. And for me to build, I have to push the opposite way pretty hard. And when we're having this conversation about clients being competitive, it's like, again, there's a difference. Are you competing because you want to get on stage? I have clients who say, hey, I just want to get on stage. I might not be the most competitive. I never want to do a national show. I have this goal. I want to do it. That's great. I am here to support that as long as you are aware of what that looks like. Somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to turn pro or I want to place like this. All right, well, that's a whole different conversation. We have to push not only harder for prep, but also harder in the off season, right? And we have to get to that uncomfortable place. And it's not easy, right? We've all been there, it's like I really don't want to be here anymore. And there is a time sometimes where it's like, you know what, like I probably could lose a few pounds, right? And that's maybe where, all right, let's increase our activity a little bit. Maybe let's do a few cardio sessions, right? Nothing that's going to be too taxing. That's something that I've changed my mind a lot on. Used to be like, oh my God, don't do cardio. You're going to lose all your gains. And now it's kind of like one of those things that is significantly having a few short cardio sessions a week and going for some walks. Like you're going to be okay. You're going to be healthier. And you're also probably not going to lose any muscle. So I would say that conversation for that client who really does need to push like that, it's either like, listen, like we have to go through these periods and like, based on your goal, like there's no way around this. The only real way around it I see is if we do even take a longer off season, but we do sandwich in like a cut, right? And I do that for many clients if they, want to do that. But again, that the time frame has to be there. Like it can't be like, oh, I got uncomfortable, so I cut. And then I, went back off season for a month and then now I'm prepping. It's like, that's usually not going to be enough time. So it's really just having that honest conversation with someone and saying like, this is where you're at. And we're going to have to be uncomfortable. And if you don't want to be uncomfortable, that's also fine. But then we're not going to probably have your best physique on stage. So ultimately the coach is the guide, but I can never make a decision for my client. So I just have to present everything here. Here are your options. What would you like to do? And then ultimately they decide.
Yeah. John, do you mind repeating it real quick? I had one of the boys text me. I just wanted to make sure nothing was wrong. So I just wasn't in.
Yeah.
What was it?
We're just talking about something, and this one's right in your wheelhouse as well. We see it a lot with women. They have to push to gain. Yep. And add that size, especially, if they're a female figure competitor, for example, would be a perfect example I can think of. Someone that really has got to pack the size on. Maybe they just won their pro card, right? And they've really got to push. And they're uncomfortable. So, what's that conversation look like? And that's where Lauren kind of nailed everything on the head, because you've got clients, you've got females that they're going to have to be 25 pounds over stage or something, and they just don't feel good in their skin. And that's that area where people struggle, so what's that conversation look like? And yeah, I think her bringing up the mini cuts is a good point. That's the first thing I thought of, but what do you have to add to that?
So we're talking about the size you need to be your best on stage, as a female, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I mean, I think it depends. It's going to be a case by case discussion, and it depends on, I think, what Lauren was saying, what level are they trying to get to? Because at the end of the day, I mean, if you tell me you want to be a pro, well then, okay, you better be looking at how big those girls are. And then you probably should look at how they look in the off season. Because, no, don't take offense, women, but us men, we put the muscle on and we get a little body fat. We just look big and still got cuts in our delts, but women gain that muscle and they put the normal amount of body fat on. They just kind of look thicker. And so they need to know, do you like that look? Are you going to like this off-season look? Yeah, you like the way that women's physique gal looks when she's peeled, but throw 25 pounds or 20 pounds of just body fat all over around some fluid. How are you going to like that look? So, and there's been clients who said, I probably am not going to. And I said, okay, well, then you probably shouldn't go in that division. You want to, I know for me, I want to look as good as I can year round, not just for one day on stage. And I know that that's a different mindset. That's how you should be if you want to be the best pro ever and blah, 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 blah. But that's not where I'm at. And it's not where everyone is. So there's those conversations that have to be had. Do you want to just push and not care how you look? and then look great for 2 or 3 times a year on stage. Okay, cool. No, that's not what I want. Okay, well then you might need to dial back your goals. Maybe being a women's physique pro isn't it. Maybe being a women's figure pro, they're big now. Maybe that's not it either. So that's kind of out of the conversation for me.
That's such a great point, Jason, because a lot of people see stage photos or how people look, because that's, again, predominantly back to that social media conversation. That's what a lot of people are sharing. And unless you've been in that position to where you know what that looks and feels like, you really don't know. You know what I mean? Like we can all look at that and like almost viscerally know how that feels. And it's just something that a lot of people are not prepared for. Like even like wellness, right? Like look at what the wellness girls look like on stage,
Yep.
right? Like if you are predisposed to have a physique like that, I would say absolutely go for it, right? You're really going to struggle in the bikini division to be symmetric. Symmetrical. Symmetrical. I was like, why did that word sound super weird?
You got the all.
Yeah, but imagine what, like, you're not just gonna like look like that off season, you know what I mean? So it's like, where am I gonna buy pants? You know, like there's a lot of questions here that need to be answered, you know, and it's like, do you want to look and feel like that? And it's ultimately comes down to, and that's why, you know, everybody, oh, are you competing now? And I'm like, no, I'm pretty happy like having a bot. Like I don't have as much muscle as I need to compete. Like I just don't. If I wanted to compete, I would need to gain muscle, which would mean that I need to gain body fat. I don't know if I want to do that right now. I'm happy. I'm okay to gain a little bit of body fat with a little bit of muscle. But again, the level of being a competitive IFBB pro who has topped my last performance, I know what that gap is, and I don't want to engage in that. And I don't want to take any performance enhancing drugs to get there either. So it's like, all right, what are my choices to not compete right now? You know, so it's not a negative thing. I think a lot of people look at that as like, well, you can do it. It's like, of course I can, but do I want to do it is the question. So I think people just need to be really realistic with that. And we have clients all the time who apply, oh, I want to do this show. Let's really peel that back. Why do you want to do the show? Is it a goal? Are your friends doing it? Did you just go through a life change? What is the motivating factor behind the show? And if the motivating factor is a great reason, then I'm all for supporting that. If it's not, then I would say we can certainly set another type of goal, and we don't need to get those last 5 to 10 pounds off that are really going to metabolically fuck you up.
Yeah, that a lot of good stuff there. The only thing I can think of it is if someone doesn't want to get that uncomfortable, but they need to, well, don't try and do it in a fucking year. I have that conversation, be like, we need about 2 or 3 years. So if you want to stay uncomfortable, if you don't want to get uncomfortable, you're going to need time. Time is the other thing that we're going to have at our disposal. So don't come to me, impatient. Like if there's a couple different ways to do this. So time off. And that's a whole other podcast and topic. A couple more things I want to hit on here real quick before we wrap up. How do you help your clients find a little bit of balance, especially in that post-diet phase? And it doesn't have to be, when I go through this plan that I'm on now on my diet breaks, there's a little bit of a mental struggle for me. I only pushed hard for 3 weeks, but there's an area of me where I just want to be able to eat an extra 50 carbs and not worry about it, right? So there's always that restriction that dieting is going to cause somebody, prep or not. How do you help someone that's coming off a diet, regardless of the situation, start to find that balance? Because that can be, if we don't help them find it, they're going to fucking find it. And they're usually going to find it from eating way too much, and they're going to get there faster. How do you help them prepare for that?
Yeah. So first I would definitely say, we want to be diligent with how we are adding food, right? That's certainly going to be something. The total amount is certainly going to depend on how lean that person got, right? Like in your case, we were talking about, John, like you didn't just finish a contest prep. So it's not like you need to add 1,000 calories back into your diet, so that conversation is very different based on where someone is at. But usually I'm big on adding in untracked meals, which again, I know is a hot topic for a lot of people, but I will do this I will do this before we enter a diet. So I'm not saying to somebody who's come fresh off a diet, just go eat whatever you want. Like that's obviously not happening. But if we've worked on all those things beforehand, adding in that flexibility can be really nice. Or even giving clients like ranges, right? Having ranges sometimes is just like that kind of, oh, okay, like I have a range. I don't need to hit it exactly, which we all know they don't need to hit it exactly every day anyway, but just having it physically written out as a range can be really useful. And And then the other thing too is I really like to start to tackle the other things outside of what's going on. Okay, how can I make this easier in their environment? Like, where are they maybe not planning or preparing enough? Where are some of the mindset struggles that they are dealing with? Can we focus on those things? Because if we start to work on those issues, oftentimes a lot of the food issues will start to resolve themselves, and getting clients to be reflective in their thoughts and their patterns and their behaviors. And one of the biggest things that we added about a year ago to our check-in sheet was, asking the client, what were some of your biggest wins this week? What were some of your biggest barriers? And a lot of times I could read that, through the lines, so to speak, through the update, but just adding that has added another layer of reflection for clients to then not only they reflect on it, but then they share with me, and then I'm able to actually give better feedback based off of that. So it's one of those things that, sometimes it's really about just asking the right things, and then you're able to see it's not always about the food. It's often about other things that are going on, and then saying, okay, how can I set up this environment for them to be successful? Okay, well, when do you always feel this desire to eat extra? Okay, is it when you train at this time and you don't feel properly? Is it after work when you're really stressed out? Is it when you didn't prep enough? Right, like it's small little things, but we all know the difference of like, hey, if I had a 20 grams of protein in a shake, I'm going to feel a little bit better than if I didn't, right? Like after, let's say a hard training session or something. And that's so small, but for someone that could really be like what helps them kind of take the edge off, so to speak. And then they're able to be adherent. So it really comes down to just asking those questions, I think. And then really, really practically speaking, I would say giving people ranges helps mentally, and then also adding in untracked meals. And that's something that I've done now for a few years versus just adding in a refeed. And again, going to be client dependent, but it's certainly something that is nice. And the whole point, again, is we're doing this beforehand, right? So it's not like I'm just throwing some new behavior on them when they're already in a mentally kind of dicey place. Like, we've already done this before.
Yeah. Would you say to have someone ultimately in the off season in a healthy place, someone that you've worked with from the start, maybe a short off season, some kind of a diet phase, now they're, back into maintenance and in the off season and in a good place? Would you feel that's someone that can mentally be able to have a couple untracked meals a week, maintain, and be able to have a healthy balance with food? Do you think there's one untracked meal place, like you, for example, right? Like you're in a good place in the off season, right? I know right now you're doing a shortcut, but mentally, just in the off season with nothing going on, are you someone that feels like two untracked meals mentally just helps you stay in the game and you feel like you're in a good place? Do you feel like that's the sweet spot for most people?
I would say yes. And actually right now I'm failing pretty terribly at my diet. On 75 hard, I've been trying to gain weight and I haven't, but I'm like a sick weight gain diet. But no, I'm happy with all of that. But yes, I would say personally that I find that the frequency of two either meals or just 2 days, right? We do a lot of what we call habit tracking. So what I'll have people do is sometimes it is just nice to track certain things, whether it's, habits or behaviors, not necessarily just macros. So for some people, what we're doing is they are doing habits 2 to 3 days a week and then tracking macros the other 4 or 5, depending. But I would say that if we're somebody who's maybe a physique athlete or has more physique focused goals, having something like 2 untracked meals absolutely is something that people can do successfully. Because again, the idea of the untracked meal is not to just go crazy with food. The idea is to just eat something that's not tracked. And my client said it literally perfectly yesterday. I'm like, this is exactly it. She was like, it was so nice to be able to have this meal with my family. And I pretty much ate what I would have normally eaten. I just didn't track it. And before, this would have spiraled into a whole fuck it mentality of oh, well, this was off plan, so I'm going to continue to eat. And she's like, and I would throw my nutritional ideals kind of out the window. And now I haven't. And when I share these kinds of things, this is what is so important to me as a coach and our team in general. But I don't want people to hear that and go, oh, well, I tried that and it didn't work. This takes a long time, right?
Yes.
If you've had food regulation issues for many years, you're not going to all of a sudden not have those. It's just like when anybody's dealing with like a black and white mindset, right? And people who are predisposed to have a black and white mindset typically struggle with not being black or white, obviously, hence the issue. But they can be like, well, I'm falling right back into the behavior. And it's like, okay, but did you act on it? No. That's a huge win. The fact that you didn't act on it, you had the thought, but you didn't act on it, is everything. Like the idea of, I don't want to be anxious. Well, fucking good luck. I mean, like, you're going to have anxious days. You're going to have anxious thoughts, obviously some people less than others. But if you're somebody who's dealt with anxiety or just any kind of negative emotion at any point in time, that's not going to ever go away. But the idea is that, okay, I felt this emotion, I didn't act on it, and I was able to move forward. So I say that because I don't want people to hear and be like, oh, that sounds like a fairy tale. I could never have an untracked meal. It takes a lot of trial and error, and it takes time to go through that. And it's not always a smooth sailing process, but when you get on the other side of it, it is absolutely so worth it to be able to, like I said, my goal is always for clients to be able to go anywhere, be with anybody, and eat anything, and still fit within the realm of like something that looks like their plan.
I agree. Jason, something that you've said for years that it still rings in my head, and I know this and I practice it, is just go out and have the word tasty meal. Just go out and have a tasty meal with your family and friends and do exactly what Laurin just said. There's multiple times where I'll go out and have chicken and a potato and some steamed veggies, and it tastes great because, I'm normally drinking shakes or I'm eating some kind of like bro food because
you're not fucking cooking it.
No, I'm a bachelor bro, so I'm just drinking shakes and eating shit.
Yeah,
so
man.
I can go out and enjoy that. And it's taken a lot of time of not dieting because I don't diet often. The longer I stay away from dieting, the easier it is to, if Gavin throws a pizza in the oven, I'll eat a couple slices that day, and that'll be my carbs for one of my meal, and I just keep rolling and nothing happens. So would you guys agree that the longer people stay off season and they stay away from that super restrictive habit, the better they can get? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no substitute. You said it earlier, John. There's no substitute for time.
Right.
And I don't care what problem or challenge that we're working through, whether it's physiologically or psychologically or both, you're going to need time to tackle that. And to think otherwise is super faulty. Because again, we've all discussed the types of clients that we work with. Like, this isn't the person who, I don't think I've worked with someone who's like, oh, I've never dieted before. And really maybe ever, especially though now, like me and Jeff Black were talking about this, Jason. I don't know when it was, but he was saying something about like, have you noticed it's been harder for people to diet? And I was like to actually like see results, not necessarily like to stay compliant. But I was like, yeah, because we're getting people who have had longer dieting histories. Like, there's just, we're not getting the 18-year-old who, and that's where the social media thing, oh, coach shows 18-year-old phenom eating 500 carbs and does 10 minutes of cardio. It's like, bro, blow me. Like, that's not most people, you know what I mean? So it's really, really frustrating for the client to see that. And that's why I always try to give context to things, not to sound negative, but it's to be like realistic about like what is involved here. And I think that some people can take that in a negative sense, and I don't mean it that way. But it's like, we always want people to be very informed about what they're doing. Like, are you informed about what's potentially going to happen?
And you know what? That just brings up an interesting point. As we get older and our age scales up, our client base and the people that kind of follow what we do, they're getting older, right? So now they've had a longer dieting history. Because Laurin, you 10 years ago, most people around you were very, very young. And now as you've gotten older, and you're not old by any means, Jason and I are fucking old. When you come to be our age, what are those people going to be like? What's their dieting history going to look like then? And that's such a good point. And maybe that question that I alluded to in the middle of this whole podcast, are you getting people that aren't able to either stick to plan or get results? That's probably a large part of the answer. And it makes complete sense. Very, very smart way to look at it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it breaks my heart, but that's why I'm like, you know what, like, I know that I'm here to help do that, whether it's a small piece of what the world needs, but I am that like absolutely passionate about helping people through this. Because if somebody can commit, I always say, like, give me a year, if you can commit a year to something and like actually actually commit mentally and physically to something, like, man, you're going to be in a different place. I'm not saying a year is going to fix all of your stuff, but even if it's a few years, like, think about the time you've wasted the past 5, 10, 20 years of these failed concepts. It's like, why don't you give something a try for 2 years and then actually be able to see sustainable results? Like, that would be fucking rad, So that's why all this is super important. I love having discussions about this because I think that more people are becoming informed. I say that and then I'll see something and I'll be like, oh no, like I usually live with like rose colored glasses, like and then I'll see something, I'll be like, oh no, lose 10 pounds in 10 days. And I'm like, hey, like, and these are people that I know are like intelligent and but you're like, I know you're trying to help, I know your intentions are good, but like, this ain't it. Like,
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever go away. I think it's less
no,
prevalent than
it
it
won't.
was back in the
Mm-hmm.
day, but I don't think it'll ever go away. But I think that's a great way to end our show. We've got so many coaches that listen to the show because there's so many coaches out there and there's so many more people to diet. So if you're out there listening, this is something I would probably save this podcast and I would go back and listen to it every 6 months at least, because the best coaches are always going to be the coaches they can learn from either the mistakes the journey they've been through personally. And also, as you continue to get more clients, you've got to continue to learn from every single person until you get to this point to where you can understand this left and right. And I really think this podcast is kind of a snapshot of that. So good times. If you guys want to follow Laurin, all of her info is in the show notes. You can click on that. Laurin, we're going to have you back on. Obviously, we've all done a lot of business together and shows and conferences and things of that nature. So you're such a good guest. We really appreciate you coming on. Do you guys have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
I
No,
do.
I don't
I
think
do.
so.
'Cause I didn't
Oh,
say it in my intro because I was like, man, everybody's really, really hyping everything up. So, two things. I don't know when this is going to air. Is it going to air before March?
It's gonna
Maybe.
end. Damn it! See, Kayla's not here. You're gonna have me
Okay.
tell me
Anyways,
to tell
this
lies.
might be too late, but on March 18th, myself, Chanel Collette, and Casey Joe Orvitis will be hosting an event. It is going to be a seminar and also a fun connection-based event. So we're going to have some guest speakers, Q&A. It's going to be Dr. Bill Campbell talking on the science of fat loss. It's going to be Taylor Sappington talking about female cycle and hormone optimization. Myself, Casey, and Chanel will be doing a Q&A. And then we're going to have a lifting session, and then we're going to go out and eat and drink and enjoy Tampa and just really connect. So I can send you that information if you want, John. And then also for anybody who is a physique coach who's listening or is just interested in learning more about this, I have been working with NASM. So they came out with a physique and bodybuilding coach course last year that I was a contributor on for many different levels. And they actually do have a special running right now, like a promo through me, which will give a very large discount for the course. I can say hands down, it is phenomenal. I had a small contribution, but other amazing people in the industry, Dr. Scott Stevenson, Chris Bearcat, Eric Helms, Trexler, all the top name people, the coaches and researchers in the field contributed here. So I will also send you that, and you can put that in the show notes too, John.
Yep. Show notes. I've got the link to your event. We'll have that up there, the NASM course link and everything that they need there. So just check that out. And also, before you all end your episode, please hit pause and leave us a review. We're getting close to 500. We really, really appreciate that. It's the biggest podcast we've all ever done. So we really, really appreciate that. But you guys have a great day. We enjoy you listening. For myself, Laurin, and Jason, we're out of here. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.